Do you ever feel completely drained by the demands of others? Do you find yourself saying yes to commitments you know you don't have the time or energy for just to avoid letting someone down? And most importantly, do you carry a quiet, growing resentment towards the very people you're trying so hard to please? If so, you are far from alone. We are taught that being kind means being selfless, that being loving means being constantly available, that being a good person means putting everyone else's needs above our own. But here's the hard truth. This model of kindness is a lie. It doesn't lead to deeper connections. It leads to burnout, anxiety, and eventually the breakdown of the very relationships you were trying to protect. Why does this happen? Why are your efforts to be a good person often the exact reason you feel used and taken advantage of? Imagine your life is a house you are building. You're paying the mental mortgage, but there's a problem. Your house has no front door, no fences. Anyone can wander in at any time, use up all your energetic utilities without ever asking. And you, the homeowner, just stand there, smiling tensely, and offer them tea. This is life without boundaries. It is chaos disguised as altruism. In this video, we are going to dismantle the common myths about boundaries. We'll explore the psychology behind people-pleasing, and most importantly, we're going to give you a step-by-step blueprint for enforcing healthy boundaries without the crushing guilt. Welcome to Psych Blueprint. Today, we build the architecture of self-respect. To break free from the people-pleasing cycle, we need to redefine what boundaries actually are. We are living in the old paradigm of boundaries. The old paradigm says that boundaries are defensive. It conjures images of stone walls and no trespassing signs. In this model, boundaries are about controlling other people's behavior. They are rules you make for others to follow. You can't talk to me like that. You must stop calling me after hours. The problem with this old model is that it doesn't work. You cannot control other people's behavior. Trying to do so only leads to power struggles, conflict, and frustration. It turns every relationship into a battleground. Meet Maria. Maria is a talented marketing manager and a chronic people pleaser. She believes her value is tied to always being available. When colleagues ask for last-minute help, she always says yes, even if it means canceling her personal plans. She is exhausted, resentful, but fears that if she says no, she won't be seen as a team player. Maria is trapped in the old paradigm. She is waiting for others to change instead of changing her own response. It's time for a new paradigm. This is the foundation of the architecture of self-respect. In this new model, boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about defining yourself. They are about clarifying what action you will take to protect your emotional, mental, and physical space. Let's return to our house metaphor. The architecture of self-respect is about designing a home that lets the right things in and keeps the wrong things out. It's about having doors that you control, windows that allow connection, and a fence that clearly defines your property. A house with no structure, people-pleasing, is chaotic. A house with structures that are too rigid, isolation, is a prison. We want a healthy sanctuary. This mindset shift changes everything. It moves you from the position of a victim to the position of the architect. A real boundary sounds like this. If X happens, I will do Y. Instead of saying, stop calling me after work, control, a healthy boundary is, I don't answer work calls after 6 p.m., self-definition. The difference is subtle but profound. The first is a command to someone else. The second is a statement about your own behavior. But why is this so difficult? If boundaries are so crucial, why do we struggle so much to set them? The answer lies deep within our psychological wiring and a toxic trio of drivers we need to expose.
Designing your architecture of self-respect requires understanding the components that build it and the forces that try to tear it down. Personal boundaries are the limits and rules we set for ourselves within relationships. They are the invisible lines that divide where you end and someone else begins. To build a solid structure, you need different types of materials. Physical boundaries, relating to your personal space, body, and need for rest. Example, asking people to knock before entering your room. Emotional boundaries, the right to your own feelings without manipulation or dismissal. This also means not absorbing other people's feelings as your own. Time and energy boundaries, how you allocate your finite resources. This is often the most violated area for people pleasers. Intellectual boundaries, respect for your thoughts and opinions, and the right to disengage from unproductive conversations. At their core, healthy boundaries are a negotiation between two fundamental human needs: the need for connection and belonging, and the need for autonomy and integrity. We are social creatures. In our evolutionary past, being ostracized from the tribe meant certain death. This fear of rejection is still very potent within our nervous system. But without autonomy, we lose our identity. We become codependent, a psychological state where our sense of self-worth is entirely dependent on the approval of others.
So why do we fall into the people-pleasing trap? It often starts in childhood. Many of us were raised to be good children. We were rewarded for compliance and punished for self-assertion. We learned that our needs were a burden and that saying no was selfish. This creates a toxic trio of psychological drivers that keep us stuck. They are known as the FOG: fear, obligation, and guilt. Fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of abandonment. When you consider setting a boundary, the primitive part of the brain, the amygdala, activates a fear response. It perceives saying no as an existential social threat. Obligation, a false belief that we are responsible for other people's feelings and happiness. We believe we must fix their problems. Guilt, the feeling that we have done something wrong or selfish by prioritizing our own needs. This guilt is often a false alarm, an echo of old conditioning, not a sign that you have actually done wrong. When someone makes a request, this FOG activates. It creates intense anxiety. To quiet this anxiety quickly, we comply. We say yes. This brings immediate relief. Conflict averted. We feel kind. But this relief is short-lived because we have betrayed our own needs, and this is where resentment begins to build. Resentment is evidence that a boundary has been violated. Over time, this resentment accumulates. It poisons your relationships and leads to burnout. The mechanism for breaking this cycle is shifting the locus of control from others back to yourself.
Now let's address the common objections and complex nuances. Skepticism 1. But aren't boundaries selfish? No. This is a critical confusion between self-care and selfishness. Selfishness is caring only about your needs without regard for others. Self-care is resource management. You cannot pour from an empty cup. By protecting your energy, you ensure that when you do give, you are giving sustainably and authentically, not out of resentful obligation. Boundaries are actually the kindest thing you can do. Skepticism 2. What's the difference between a boundary and an ultimatum? This is crucial. The difference is control. An ultimatum is an attempt to control someone else's behavior through threat. It is focused on the other person. You must stop working late or I will leave you. This creates a power struggle and often leads to defensiveness. A boundary is a statement about your own action to protect yourself. It is focused on you. When you work late every night, I feel lonely and disconnected. If this continues, I will need to seek support externally to meet my connection needs. They are psychologically worlds apart. One seeks to manipulate, the other seeks to inform. Skepticism 3. What if they get angry or disappointed? They probably will. When you change the rules of the game, people who are used to you having no boundaries will react. But here is the crucial point. Their emotional reaction to your boundary is not your responsibility. You are responsible for communicating your boundary kindly and clearly. You are not responsible for managing their feelings about it. People who truly respect you will eventually respect your boundaries. Those who don't are simply revealing to you who they really are. Their anger is the discomfort of losing a privilege they shouldn't have had in the first place. The cost of ignoring this blueprint is immense. It isn't just theoretical. Let's return to Maria. Her exhaustion worsened. She was working 60 hours a week. Her health was deteriorating. She carried a deep resentment because she was trapped in the fog. The breaking point came when Maria had a panic attack at her desk after her boss criticized her for a minor error, completely ignoring her extra hours. She was on the verge of severe burnout. It was a painful wake-up call. Maria realized that the architecture of her life had completely collapsed. She had let everyone trespass on her property to the point where there was nothing left for herself. A lack of boundaries is at the core of many mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, and chronic burnout. Physically, it leads to sleep issues and impaired immune function. This doesn't have to happen to you. You can change the blueprint. The process starts with learning how to manage your internal reactions before you try to manage external interactions. Now, let's open up the toolkit and start building.
Building your architecture of self-respect is a three-stage process. It starts internally and then moves externally.
You can't fix a structure if you don't know where it's broken. The first step is identifying where boundaries are needed most. The best tool for this is your resentment. In the context of boundaries, resentment is data. Here's how to conduct a resentment audit. For the next 3 days, write down every time you feel resentment, frustration, or taken advantage of. Use a 2-column journal. Column 1, the situation. Who is involved? What happened? Column 2, the boundary violated. What do you wish you had done differently? What need was unmet? Example. Situation. Colleague asked me to finish their report last minute on Friday evening. Boundary violated? I wish I had said no. My need for rest and personal time was violated. After 3 days, review your notes. Look for patterns. Choose 1 or 2 high-impact boundaries to start with. Maria identified that after-hours work requests were her top priority. This is the most crucial stage, and the one most often skipped. Before you can effectively communicate your boundaries externally, you must manage the internal chaos of the fog: fear, obligation, guilt. When you think about setting the boundary, your nervous system will react. Your heart races, your stomach tightens. This is the false alarm we discussed. If you try to set a boundary while in this state, you are likely to become overly aggressive or overly passive and apologetic. We need to stabilize your physiology so you can act from calm inner authority. Here is the 5-second physiological anchor technique. When you feel the anxiety of the fog rising, do this. Take 2 quick inhales through the nose, followed by a complete, slow exhale through the mouth. Inhale, inhale, long exhale. This instantly activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. It slows your heart rate and allows your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, to come back online.
Practice this before any difficult boundary conversation.
Once you have identified your boundary, stage 1, and stabilized your nervous system, stage 2, it's time to upgrade how you communicate and enforce your boundaries. For this, we use the if-then framework. This is the most powerful tool in your toolkit. It pairs the boundary with a clear consequence, shifting the locus of control back to you. The structure is, if blank behavior occurs, then I will blank your action. If you start yelling during our discussion, then I will leave the room until we can talk calmly. If you text me about work after 7 p.m., then I will not respond until the next morning. Maria told her boss, if requests are made after 5 p.m. on Friday, then I will not be able to start on them until Monday. When you communicate the boundary, remember the 3 principles: clear, kind, and direct. There is no need to over-justify or apologize. The most critical part is enforcement. A boundary that is not enforced is merely a suggestion. You must be willing to follow through with the then action. And prepare for resistance. In behavioral psychology, it's called an extinction burst. It's when a behavior gets worse before it gets better. If someone is used to getting what they want from you, they will try harder when you say no. They might get angry or try to guilt trip you. This is where you must hold the line. Use your physiological anchor. Remember, the extinction burst is a good sign. It means your boundaries are working. The old system is breaking down. Consistency is key. If you give in, you reinforce the negative behavior.
The journey of mastering boundaries is not about becoming rigid or isolated. It's not about building walls to keep you separate from the world. It's about becoming a skilled architect of your own life. It's about creating an architecture of self-respect. Remember where we started. The chaotic house with no doors, the constant feeling of resentment and exhaustion, the storm of the fog. Now visualize a different reality, a beautifully designed home. The doors are solid, the windows let in light, and a clear fence defines your property. You decide who comes in and when. Your energy is protected. As you begin to live within this structure, the quiet resentment you've carried for so long begins to dissipate. It's replaced by a deep sense of inner peace. You are no longer operating from fear or guilt. You are operating from calm inner authority. Your relationships begin to shift as well. Some relationships may fade away, but the ones that remain will become deeper and more meaningful because now you are engaging with people from a place of authenticity. You are teaching people how to love you. So here is my challenge to you. Start building today. Conduct that resentment audit for 3 days and practice the physiological anchor technique when you feel anxious. Pick one boundary to start with. It won't be easy, but it is worth it because the cost of not doing it is your own life. Thank you for watching Psych Blueprint. If you found value in this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more science-backed blueprints to master your mind. And let us know in the comments below, what is the first boundary you are going to set? Until next time, keep building wisely.